Welcome to our show, Korelin with Dr. Frieda. And today we have a guest that we are really very impressed by. Calvin Dark is his name. So welcome to our show. We've been very happy to have you on. And the first thing I would like to ask you is that, for the past several months, we have had conversations with people of color about racism, discrimination. And, we want our listeners to learn our conversation and that can be life-saving as well for people of all color to celebrate their lives. We're in the midst of continuation of vandalism, of destruction, and it has not slowed down as our show has progressed all these months. Do you have a concern that this could come into the neighborhoods, into the middle-class neighborhoods, rioting and vandalism as well?
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question. And I think one of the things that'll kind of help put my answer in context is currently I'm principal and co-founder of RC Communications. We're a strategic communications firm in Washington, D.C., and we tackle a lot of these really complex issues with our clients on the messaging side and hopefully make a difference in their campaigns and what they're doing. So with that being said, the way that you frame the question, I think, is a bit backwards. And I say that because I'm not as concerned about supposed vandalism or violence coming into the neighborhoods. I'm more concerned with the existing tension, systemic racism, inequality that's causing disruptions and, unfortunately, physical violence and death for people in many communities. So I don't see it as we're at peace now and this thing is coming. I see the protest as a result of people are just fed up with what they've been dealing with, what we have been dealing with for decades and centuries almost in this country.
Calvin, let me just kind of weigh in on that. I don't disagree at all with what you were saying. The one comment that I would make is in our foundation, Birnbaum Korelin Judeo-Christian Foundation for Equality, we give an awful lot of airtime to both sides of every single story. The one comment that I would make is a lot of people do not stop and listen. There are too many preconceived notions out there, and there is too much in the way of with anger, I think, involved in situations. I think there's an awful lot of misunderstanding. I would have to say that there are some serious protests going on in Seattle, Washington right now, as I'm sure you are aware. We had one of the very active protesters on our radio program about a week ago, and I have to tell you, everything that this man said happened to be a man of color, but so what? We're all human beings. And I have to say that he had some very interesting things to say, and it's just a shame that both sides don't listen to what this guy said, because every issue can be solved if people just lift the veil of emotion and look at the facts. Calvin, don't you agree?
Yes, but I one of the things that I want to kind of caveat that with, and this is something that I've thought a lot about in my adult life, in particular over the last few months, is we got to be really careful about, this debate over how to tackle these issues, that we don't make it a theoretical exercise that's divorced from emotion or anger, because I think that can actually be a problem when you have people discussing it in such a sterile way, when they don't realize that this isn't just something I talk about on Facebook or something we talk about on a program, but this is actually something that people have to deal with every day. And let me make that personal. These are things that I have to deal with when I walk out of my house. And so I do agree with you that we've got to do a better job of listening to each other. But I also think that we need to acknowledge that, once again, the people's lives are at stake. So when they do act in a way that people don't understand or they think is disproportional or they don't understand why they took that particular action, it doesn't excuse it. But I think people realize that they need to think about where it's coming from, and that may help people understand why there's so much tension, anger, and emotion.
And I'd like to find out really what does happen to you that you feel a sense of discrimination when you walk out the door of your house in the morning. Is there anything that you can pinpoint that happens?
Yes, and I'll give you kind of like the broad picture and then like a very specific example. But I think specific examples are helpful to help people understand situations they may not be in. When it comes to saying, today or tomorrow, what is the racism that I feel, that's kind of hard to put my finger on, because as an African-American young man in this country, I had great parents and community who raised me to realize the circumstances that I lived in and how I best had to cope and respond to them. So it's not as if there's a particular situation that I'm careful about on Tuesdays at noon. Rather, it's all the time. Now, to be specific, let me tell you something that really kind of shaped my view. About 10 years ago, Saturday afternoon, I was stopped by the police in my car. Long story short, they thought it was somebody else in a car, and I was actually parking near my house. So maybe they saw me in my car. They had questions. It was a difficult stop, and they ended up sort of apologizing. But let me tell you how that affected me, because, I was never charged with anything, and there was no follow-up to that after it. But about a week later, I was in my apartment, and I wanted some orange juice. And any other time, I would have gotten in my car, walked down the street, and bought my orange juice. I caught myself at my door saying, well, it is 9 o'clock. I don't really need to be out there. Why am I going out this late? And I just shook myself and said, oh, my God. I have now been scared to go do something legal, normal, and is my right, because that police stop that I had made me think that I'm doing something wrong. So that kind of situation that I had, one, is a minor situation compared to what a lot of African Americans are dealing with, but it shapes you so that I, in a sense, carry that with me every time I walk out my door. So that's how I see the racism, systemic racism that we're talking about.
Calvin, I just want to say one thing, and I'm only saying this because we have to take a commercial break here in less than a minute. But I want to say one thing, and I want to so that this thing isn't totally one-sided. I understand what you're saying totally, and I do not disagree with you. I believe you did say that the policeman did apologize to you, and that's a far cry from many things that I hear about, through our foundation. Frieda and I are very, very passionate about what you are saying, and I can totally understand, as can Dr. Birnbaum, what you are saying. And it strikes me that you are in the perfect position and I believe you're doing this. Let's get the message out there so that people understand there is a problem and they understand that this is a situation that we have to deal with. Calvin and I and Dr. Birnbaum will be right back, you guys.
Calvin, it reminds me of something I saw in the media the other day. There was a black young man who said, when he is wearing his doctor's uniform, people respect him. And when he is wearing a hoodie, he really looks as if someone is going to cause trouble, and that's how they treat him, not that that's who he really is. So we really can't change the color of our skin. That's true. But we do have to change the attitude of people around us who have not experienced this type of discrimination. And we really need to be able to have changes in our lives as well. When we are going around discriminating against racism, we also have to know that we have to discriminate against the way people in our country are being valued. When small businesses are being trashed, when the healthcare system is broken, when people can't pay their rents. There's a lot of anger going on both sides. And these are the things we have to really change. Socialism right now seems as if it's something that could give us what we're lacking. Then again, it could take away from what America stands for. And we have to be careful because that's extremely dangerous as well. I'd like to hear your comment on this conversation that I'm talking about right now.
Well, I think what you mentioned is very true. And actually, when you were describing example of the African American man with the hoodie versus, in a doctor's uniform, I actually think that's a perfect example of what systemic racism feels like. I say that because if you, say, for example, are a white male and you're wondering, well, how does that feel? Feel like you're in a racist system, it means that every decision you make, from what I wear to go to the grocery store, is based on how I think people are going to view me. So I do think that is important. I think that's what people need to realize, that African Americans, we have a lot more calculations to do on the most daily things because of a system that we have dealt with all of our lives and we hope to change. Now, I know that, yes, in theory, it would be great if people saw me or you for who we are without regards to not ignoring my skin, because my skin is important and I'm proud of it, but not treating me negatively because of it or because of perceptions of what I might be or what I might do. However, I don't think that that's something that we can ask the government to do or that we can really wait on. What we can tell people is work out your own issues about what you perceive about people who are different. But while you're working that out, I'm going to need you to not go ahead and assume that I'm a criminal or that you should be suspicious of me, because I don't think that we're going to get to the solution by waiting for people to kind of, I hate using the word magically, but magically change the way that they've been thinking, not only in this country, but since the beginning of the world.
That I find to be really interesting is one of the reasons Frieda and I are doing what we are doing with the foundation. And I want to stress one thing, we're kind of fortunate, at least I am, in the sense that my working life is pretty much behind me. I worked like a dog all my life, and I'm able now to devote time to what we are trying to do because I'm very passionate about it. Every guest, Calvin, who we have had on the program, every guest of color, starting with a black preacher from New York, has said, white people can't change us, we got to change ourselves. And that's what you're saying. And Calvin, you have all of my respect in the world, sir.
I think that is a very important point, but I also want to say that I don't want to make it seem as impossible as it might have sounded before. It is possible, and there are a lot of people of different races who are trying. I think that part of the problem, part of the reason for the misunderstanding is that we have a lot of people in this country, particularly a lot of policymakers and lawmakers, and you can't see me, but I'm pointing at certain people who don't even acknowledge that the problem exists. So when you were talking about the fact that, I as an African American can't change white perception, that is true. Biggest problem we have is that we're having a debate now with people that don't even believe that the problem exists. And so that's a bigger issue than solving it.
It reminds me, Calvin, of a neighbor of mine who's African American, and she told her son, if the police ever stop you, say, yes, sir, don't move. Don't look the wrong way, whatever they want you to do, because your life is in danger. And she's complaining that her son has to live this way in a state of distress, that something could happen where my kids don't have to live this way. I never had to tell them to worry about their safety. I had to tell them to drive carefully for sure. So yes, it's a lot of pressure on young people today. But then again, I see some movement and some change in my neighborhood as well. My children don't know about color. They don't know black or white. They don't know the difference, which I'm very proud of, because it's the human being that counts. But I'm also wondering, economically, do you feel that there is a divide when one black person does something, murdering or killing someone, that all black people are seen a certain way, that live in underprivileged neighborhoods. And when people live in middle class, upper middle class neighborhoods, black or white, that they're seen a different way as well. Is there that there is some discrimination in that community as well?
Well, my first answer to that was when you mentioned your neighbor giving, what often people refer to as the talk, which my parents had that to me. I mean, that's a very normal thing. I want to point out that even when now we're at such a bad place, that when people do say the yes, sir, and are and comply, that doesn't work all the time. And in my specific example that I gave at the beginning of the program, where they did apologize, here's something I left out. Before they apologized, I was handcuffed and made to sit on the sidewalk while they figured out that I wasn't who they were looking for in my predominantly white neighborhood, who are now wondering why their black neighbor is sitting on the sidewalk in handcuffs. So, and I am one of the most deferential Southern people you will ever meet. And I've had this exact tone of voice. So I want to clarify that even when you are quote unquote nice and respectful, that doesn't always work. But now to answer your question about economics, here's the thing that I think is just so unique about the United States. In a lot of ways, money changes a lot of things, except for race. Because let me tell you something, in this country, when people see you, they don't see you for the money you have. They see you as that black man or that black woman. And while, yes, if you are in a neighborhood, if you're an African American and you are in a neighborhood that is more well off and more affluent, you do have more opportunities. However, if you are downtown, the same perceptions that someone would give to the African American man that came from the economically depressed neighborhood, they're going to give to that person. And they don't care if they own the whole rich side of town. So we got to be really careful that, yes, we have so many economic problems to address, which is at the root of a lot of the problems we have. But I want to make sure that it's clear that it's not as if money or economic empowerment somehow mitigates these problems with racism, because racism exists. My daddy always used to say green is an important color, but black is the one that's going to count when you run into somebody in the street. And I think that's important for people to realize.
I got to tell you, sir, I appreciate your commentary. I appreciate it a lot. One of the reasons that our foundation is so important to Dr. Birnbaum and myself is because we can only address these problems when they are identified in a clear and concise manner, as you have done. I have a lot of time for you, sir. We're going to get you back on the program. You are, in my opinion, very definitely going in the right direction. Frieda, we got 9 minutes. Wrap it up.
Well, what's important to know also that we are uniting together more than ever. People of all color can feel the pain of what racism has done in our country. And we want to make sure that we can undo it. So we're all marching in this together. We have people like yourself, leaders in your field, people that are inspirational, people who have persevered and still go on. This is what our country needs to see more of. Not the people who are out there rioting and are making the news, but people like yourself who really represent your race. And that's what we will continue to do moving forward. Thank you so much, and we want to have you on back again for sure, Calvin. Thank you.